Hi everybody, I'm Andy Cuddy from Patient Handling. Jeremy's invited us along today to meet you guys and have a bit of a chat to you about ceiling hoists. So we're the importer for Maylift for Australia, and we've been doing ceiling hoists now for about 11 years. And Jeremy is our distributor in your area. So, say again, mate.
Yeah, the Gippsland and Melbourne Southeast region.
Gippsland Lakes, yep.
Yep.
So, yeah, like I know that there's probably a range of different levels of experience with ceiling hoists amongst you guys. So what I've tried to do is give as good an overview as I can of the kinds of situations you can put a ceiling hoist in, the components that are involved, and how to fill out as much of a form to send off to Jeremy to be able to give a good indication of the cost. So what we'll do is we'll just jump in. I hope it's not death by PowerPoint. I've never done a PowerPoint presentation before, so I'm a bit scared. Jeremy's got like a coffee caffeine injection he can send around to all of you if you all start falling asleep. So there's like an emergency button you can press if you start to fall asleep, like a dead man switch. So can you flick over to the to my maiden PowerPoint, please, Jeremy?
Sure can. Just say welcome to Paul. Hi, Paul. Marg, welcome. Alicia, g'day. How you going? Emily, welcome. Might just hold off for a couple of seconds, Andy, and just wait for make sure we've got everyone in the lobby before we kick off. So I reckon another minute and we'll be good to go.
Okay, no worries.
So just while we're waiting, Andy, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about why we decided to put this presentation on. So there's been a lot of interest in ceiling track hoists amongst our customer and therapist base, but we sort of felt that perhaps more broadly speaking, they weren't being prescribed all that often. And our experience has been that having a ceiling track hoist in the home has allowed a lot of people to stay at home a lot longer, because it alleviates some of the manual handling issues that are associated with using a mobile floor hoist. And I just feel like I've seen a number of instances out and about in the community where our carers have just given up because it's too hard to push one of those hoists, those mobile floor hoists around. I don't know whether you have any experience with that, Andy, but I feel like this is a good way around that problem.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so that you've all sort of seen the force that's required to move a floor hoist on carpet, even without somebody in it. Like you know, and if the hoist weighs 30 or 40 kilos, and then you put a 70 or 80 kilo person in it, the overcoming the friction on the carpet is quite hard, and you end up holding the handles on the hoist and twisting your body. It's like, when you're in the supermarket and you're trying to turn a shopping trolley that's completely full, and you sort of tweak your back, like you're trying to do that and move this thing that's all out in front of you. But there's some techniques you can use to avoid that force on your back, but it's the fundamental problem with the floor hoist. So
yeah. And residential properties, sometimes they're just not designed to take floor hoists. We've got tight clearances in bedrooms and things like that, and it'd be really, really, really tricky.
It's very, very rare that a house is designed with the mind for the future, that the person who's living there could have mobility issues and end up needing to be transferred. So that it's just a drawback of modern housing, or all housing really.
Yeah, yeah, it's just out and about in the community. So,
yeah.
All right, I think we're at 9:37. Enough chitter chatter. Let's get started.
Okay, so I've put together this presentation. We're going to flip backwards and forwards between me showing you components and talking about bits and pieces, and doing a few little practical demonstrations and the PowerPoint. So if we can just get going on the first slide, Jeremy. That's a good one. So why we use a ceiling hoist? So we were just talking about some of the benefits then. The primary benefit is reduces the manual handling, which is we were just talking about. So the friction involved in the lateral transfer of somebody once they're in the air with a ceiling hoist is almost zero. There's no rolling resistance in the trolleys, so that the force that you need to apply to the person to get them, to transfer once they're hoisted off the bed to transfer over to the mattress or to the chair or the commode or whatever they're transferring to is almost zero. So that reduces the manual handling risk. So it saves on floor space, as Jeremy was just alluding to. You just like, where do you park the hoist when you're not using it? Getting it through doorways, people's houses end up being equipment stores. So it gets the thing up off the floor. It reduces the risk of the person being hoisted. So there's always a risk of, tipping over a hoist or dropping someone on the floor, and it just takes away another element of risk to the person. And another huge benefit is it can reduce the number of care hours that you need. So if you can, do a proper risk assessment and the general practice is that you use 2 carers to do a hoist transfer, like a floor hoist transfer. If say it costs you $40 an hour to have your carers in for an hour to do the transfers. So if you reduce your cost by half, it will reduce your care cost by a significant amount. And if you add up the overall cost per annum, it saves you about $5,000. Like, these are just like ballpark numbers, but you can sort of see the idea that if you've managed to take one carer out of the requirement to do transfers every day, you've halved your hours, and it means that people's budgets for whichever package they're on or their own money can go a lot further. So let's just look at some of the drawbacks of the ceiling hoist. So the issue is with the ceiling hoist, it's going to be in the one spot. So if it's an XY system, it'll cover the whole room, but ultimately, a floor hoist is completely flexible. You can take it anywhere in the house. So it's not suited to all types of buildings. So with, and we're going to look at a few different options of installing. So the house might be a glass house with 25-metre high ceilings. You're not going to be able to install a ceiling hoist there. So, but there are solutions to that problem. So we're going to have a look at those. Another thing is it needs to be installed, and like Jeremy alluded to some of the issues that are around installation. You need to have compliance. You need to have, there's a whole process to go through there. And if you leave the house, so if it's a rental or whatever, you need to uninstall it. So those are the and also the initial cost can be significantly more than a floor hoist. So you can buy a floor hoist from $2,500 to $5,000, $6,000. So there's our solution. If you can't fit into fit a ceiling hoist in, use a portable gantry. So it's easy to install. It's a little bit limited. It takes up a bit of room on the floor, but it is a good solution. So you can get those as straight rail or an XY system as well. So 3 metres by 3 metres or 4 metres by 4 metres. So, all right. Next.
Sorry, it just sounds like you're being invaded at the moment, Andy. We'll just wait for the aeroplane to pass over.
I know, but that actually doesn't happen very often anymore. That's the one flight a day out of that regional airport around the corner, Kingsford Smith. Yeah. That's
great. I just jump in, Andy. We've had a recent experience in a rental where we had an NDIS participant who was really struggling with manual handling, and this gantry style system worked a treat for them. They were able to perform perform transfers with the care staff that they had in place, didn't need to employ extra care hours, and could still get this sort of benefit without installing a track on the ceiling. So great success.
Yeah. So we've decided we're going to go with ceiling hoist. We've gone through our whole decision matrix. What are we trying to achieve with ceiling hoist? So who's going to be lifting it? So do they have any particular diagnosis that means that there's things that need to be considered? The key question, is what transfers are you going to try and do? So the big ones are out of bed and into a wheelchair or a commode or whatever. So people have these grand ideas about what they want to achieve with a ceiling hoist, but you have to think about the majority of transfers that you're going to be doing, and decide in an order of priority which you want to dedicate the funds to. And the final thing we need to think about is what the safe working load is for the ceiling hoist. So just a sec. So it's possible to do all sorts of things with ceiling hoists. You can run tracks around the whole building. But you need to consider, go back to that question, what transfers are we trying to do? So, so next slide, Jeremy. So the possibilities are, and the majority of installations that we do is a straight 3-metre rail over a bed. This one's over a toilet, but I use this picture to demonstrate the area of effectiveness of the hoist. So it's directly underneath the rail, but it is the cheapest installation you can do, and it's also solves the biggest problem, which is the in and out of bed transfer every day. So you've got 1 or 2 transfers at least a day. So
yeah, I'd say it's pretty common, or far and away the most common installation we would do here, Andy, is just over the bed and onto your piece of mobility equipment, and that allows you to go from the bed to your powered wheelchair, back to the bed, back to your commode, maybe back into a day chair. It's surprising when you think about it how much independence you can provide just with a single rail system like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next sort of item to consider, or system to consider, is an XY system or traverse system, and it basically known as full room coverage system. So anywhere underneath the 2 rails that are attached to the ceiling, which are the primary rails, so anywhere under that area you can pick someone up from. So in a shed, a disability accommodation, these are quite common because people have falls in rooms, and there's different carers, and there's a lot more equipment in the room. So you can have a power wheelchair and a commode all sitting there and transfer from one to the other. So next one, mate. So a continuous traverse system. I'm not sure if you can see there on this picture, but this is an XY system that is built in a room, and then there's a wall built underneath the secondary rail, and this allows the ability to transfer from room to room without having to have complicated through door systems. So this is the only the kind of thing that you would put in if you were doing a new build or a major bathroom, bedroom modification. So it requires demoing the wall and putting in the system, then building the wall up to underneath the system. So
sorry to interrupt, guys. There's just a quick question in there too. I'm not sure if you spotted that yet.
No, I didn't.
Sorry, I'll read it out for you.
Yeah.
So Paul has asked, just before we move further, he's asked, is there a recommended care ratio for a ceiling hoist? Do you need a carer to stabilize the patient while someone controls the hoist?
No. So with all situations, you do a risk assessment, but in like 90% of the cases, you would one carer to lift, like, you know, to apply the sling and do the hoist and transfer as well. Because once the client's in the sling, it's a very stable transfer. So yeah, so there's no requirement for an additional carer in 90% of cases. But again, risk assessment every time.
Yeah, just to add to that, Andy, in terms of performing the physical transfer, that's definitely the case. The risk assessment may come into it with the practice of fitting the sling to the person, or there may be some other advanced reason that you would need two carers for. But we've seen a lot of people, a lot of elderly carers, in fact, find success in caring for their loved ones fairly independently in a home care environment with just one carer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we can do curves. So, you know, not all situations suit just a straight rail. So there's a possibility to do curves if it's required for a system. So again, you know, it's down to what transfers you're trying to do. And the curves sort of come into their own a little bit when you're doing from a bedroom to a bathroom, and there might be, or once you're in the bathroom, if there's, you know, multiple things that you want to have the hoist go over, like through a shower into a toilet or something like that. So you can use curves to get those. So they're available in 30 degree, 60 degree, 45 and 90 degree. So as I said, like, you can get as complicated as you like with this stuff, but again, the 3 metre rail is pretty much the staple.
Yeah. One thing that I take away from this little picture, Andy, is that one of the only ways to get people into a bath, save for the specialised elevated baths, is using a ceiling track hoist. So if you've got someone who's interested in taking a bath still, but needs assistance to transfer in there, this is one of the most effective ways to get someone in and out of a bath.
If not the only way.
Yeah, yeah.
Like those like side opening baths are sort of okay, but they present a few problems. This is the most efficient way of doing it. So,
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So switches, like, you can get direction change and go onto a different rail. So these will direct the rail. Ooh, we've lost you. Yeah, so you can change direction and go onto a different system if required. Again, more complexity, not really required a lot of the time. But, you know, people come up with ideas, and, you know, you sort of got to appease their wishes. So, and I think the next one is transition couplings. So this is a coupling that allows you to go from a straight rail onto an XY system. So quite often an XY system is more suited to a bathroom where you've got multiple lifting points that you want to go to, and the straight rail, you're always lifting from the same sort of position on a bed. So you can pick up from a bed and then go into a bathroom and then go anywhere in the bathroom. So that's what transition couplings are used for. And then you can just go completely crazy and put it all together. So again, you can build a full train set around your house, but for people that we've done this, it's quite a big impact on the household. It has a lot of visual impact. Like, there's a lot of engineering that goes into the whole thing, and also, you know, it's slightly dehumanising, like putting someone on the rail and moving them from station to station. Sometimes if somebody's able to self-transfer or, you know, apply a sling themselves, that's a different thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But essentially, if you're on the system, it's a little we think it's a little bit dehumanising. So
Still, I think, Andy, the thing that we see most commonly and works best for people is using the mobility equipment for moving around the house more broadly, with just some specified transfer points. Where we have seen this work really well is that there's a local specialist school that's got quite an advanced system like this, and that provides great opportunities for gait training and participation inside the classroom that just wouldn't be possible without this sort of implementation. So there's certainly circumstances where it is a really great idea, but I think I agree, inside a home environment, it might look a bit like you've got a monorail upside down in your house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that you know, like special schools, it's fantastic. But in a domestic situation, we've done it in domestic homes, but you know, the expense and the overall usefulness of it is, you know, I think it's probably wasted money. And we always tell the clients that the most effective, cost-effective solution is the 3 metre rail over the bed. So, yeah. Anyway. Moving right along. So once we've got the ceiling hoist installed, or, you know, it's sort of part of the whole decision-making process, what are our options for ceiling hoist motors?
What model is that there?
That's one of the earlier models. It's not really available anymore. It never has a problem with flat batteries though.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. So there's a portable ceiling hoist motor, which is able to be moved from room to room. So I've got one of those here, and I'm just going to flip over to the other camera and pop over and show the Nomad. So you got me there?
Should be good.
Okay, so this is the Nomad, and you can see it's pretty light. It's weighs about 8 kilos, but even that, I think, you know, is probably a little bit too heavy for most people to be lifting if the, you know, in the care environment. So the concept behind the Nomad is that it's, and there's other brands of portable hoist around as well, is that you instead of having a lift motor in for everywhere there's a rail, you can have maybe 4 rooms or 8 rooms and have one lift motor to go between all locations. And it's got this little reacher arm thing here, which is a hook which goes onto the end of the lifting strap, and it's got a little spring-loaded safety clip on it, and that's used for reaching up and connecting to the rail like that. And then we put the reaching arm away, and we can turn it on and off. So this is different from the other styles of hoist because the lift motor goes up and down, and it lifts itself up to the rail. So you can see there, and it's got the 4-point suspension that MoLift is sort of all about. So you've got the 4 lifting points there. These range in weight capacity from 160 kilos to 255. So when you finish using it, you just lower it back into the trolley, and you can move it to the next place that needs to be utilised. The Nomad is also on the neck. The Nomad's also able to be used to transfer from a room, and go underneath the door. So you can have a system in one room and then have the client in the hoist come through, clip onto the strap in the next room. So that you have to imagine that there's a doorway here. Well, I couldn't really build a doorway to demonstrate it. And then the clients you lower the lifting strap down, and then I can reach up and get that, but I'll get the reach arm to do it. Unhook the hook it onto that one. Then I can and I've successfully transferred from room to room then. So with decline on the hoist. So these have a charge life of about 40 to 60 lifts like for an average sort of person. So, and they have quite a fast lifting speed as well. So it means your transfers don't take too long. So that's a portable hoist. And there's other brands out there that do similar sorts of things. So the next one is, if we flip back to the other, for the PowerPoint, Jeremy. So that's how the through the door situation works. So you come up to the door, you clip on to the second strap, and then you take the weight on the new strap and swing between the two. So it sounds a bit clunky, but it actually works pretty well in practice. Whilst we're on the subject of getting through doorways, if you need to get through a door with a fixed lift motor, you end up making a bit of a hole in the top of the door like that if the head of the door isn't flush with the rail. So you have to do a cutout that will fit the lift motor through it. Or if you are able to make the head of the door flush with the rail, you can have it so that the door will close flush and there's no air gap. So those are the two ways you can get through a door if you're not using the swinging lifting strap. So the next style of lift motor is the fixed lift motor. So there's a whole range of these. So there's a 200 kilo one, which has not all the features like in-rail charging or power traverse. It's really geared towards home care. So it's built to a price, but it still has like the 205 kilo lifting capacity. I've got one of those here. If we just flip back to my screen, Jeremy, I can show everyone that. So this is like one of the MoLift's fixed lift motors. So this lives up on the rail, and it attaches to the rail using a trolley like that. So this trolley goes into the rail like this, and so you can sort of see it protrudes like that. And on the top of the hoist, there's two pins, and that's how simply it attaches to the rail. So you don't need any special tools to attach it to the rail. So that they can be transferred from room to room, not as effectively as the Nomad, and you need a ladder. So, or you need to be very tall.
So I suppose, Andy, would you say that sort of implementation might be more relevant in an aged care facility or something like that, where they might install a rail in every room, but transfer a fixed number of lift motors around?
Yeah, so with the Nomad, you definitely that's what you definitely do. So in aged care, like the ratio that we work on, like say it's like a 64 room facility, you'd have eight ceiling hoist motors. So 8 per room, 8 rooms per lift motor.
Yeah,
but
got it.
Really depends on the layout of the building. So there's sometimes they create, like with aged care, they'll create a house within the aged care facility, and it'll be like, it might be 10 rooms. That's okay, because ultimately it's going to be the same care as doing the transfer in each house. So as long as it's broken down that way, you don't end up running out of hoists. 8 to 10 is fine.
Is about
But,
right. Yep.
With a lift motor like this, you can have these in aged care as well, or in a facility where they need to be changed. Like there might be a resident who's in that room and who has really high needs and needs to be transferred all the time, like for whatever reasons. So you would have it, like you might put a fixed motor in there. So, yep. And in shared disability accommodation, usually each room ends up with a fixed lift motor in it, because everyone who's in those facilities, or, in the shared accommodation, generally has high needs and is being transferred, and it also gives them a degree of independence, so they're not waiting around for the lift motor if they need to be transferred.
Yep.
So yeah, this one lives up on the rail. I'll just give you a look what's inside them. So you can see that there's lots of stuff in there. This thing over here is the battery. That's the gearbox. There's a motor behind this printed circuit board. That's the printed circuit board. So there's a lot of stuff. It's not just a thing that winds you up. There's a lot of technology goes into these things to make them safe, so that they can't freewheel and drop somebody. So yeah, and they're pretty easy to service as well. So you can access the inside of the lift motor pretty easily. I'll just put the cover back on this, and I'll show you what it looks like up on the rail. Just flick you over. Yes, I do. Switch camera. Goodness me. So to put this up on the rail, ideally you have a ladder that it would be better with a ladder, wouldn't it? So that's how that one looks on the rail, and the suspension can be 2-point or 4-point, and it just attaches with a little push pin like that. So goes through there.
It's great on this system that it's just all quick release. It makes installation and servicing and any changes that are necessary really easy, Andy.
So that's the hoist going down. It also has an up function. So what we were talking about before in the question that I think was it Peter had, how much friction's involved? I'm not barely touching that. That's how much resistance there is, because the rollers are hard and the rail's hard. So it doesn't deform when the weight goes onto it, so it doesn't really change. So yeah, there's very little friction. So that's the Molift Air 200. If we flip back to the Prezo, mate.
Yep.
There's a 200, then because they made the 200 as a commodity range. There's a 205 and a 300, which the 205 and the 300 are actually the same lift motor, and they have all the features. So in-rail charging, and they can have in-rail charging. They can have power traverse, and then they've also just released a 350 kilo motor. So it has in-rail charging, power traverse. It's designed for institutional care like hospitals, and then there's the 500 kilo lift motor. So it's a single lift motor, and it will lift up to 500 kilos safely. And we've just launched the sling range that goes with that. So we've done 2 of those so far. Everyone talks about, bariatrics, the big thing and that sort of stuff. It's less than 1% of the population in hospitals. So
I imagine, Andy, you would need a fair bit of supporting infrastructure if you're doing an installation like that, in terms of beds and wheelchairs and equipment to support people up to 500 kilos, which is a consideration for an installation like that.
Everything to do with it, width of door, the doors have to be wide. The toilet, there's a brand of toilet called the Big John, and it's because if someone's toileting at that weight, a porcelain toilet's too dangerous because it'll just shatter. Yep. So there's so many considerations. So it's not something to be undertaken lightly, that's for sure.
Yep.
So that's the range of lift motors, and all manufacturers have, like, you know, lift motors that fall into similar ranges, but we think that the Molex ones are a little bit easier to work with because they're designed by Norwegians. They just do such a good job of design. Things are really well engineered. So,
do you want to, Andy, just talk a little bit about in your typical home care environment when we're talking about those single rail installations, or we're talking about just an XY gantry in someone's bedroom? How would you make the decision between sort of one of the fixed hoist motors and the Nomad portable hoist?
So I would use the Nomad if there was the potential. So say if you're in a bedroom that there was no chance of putting an ensuite to, or no chance of running a rail from the bedroom to the bathroom, you would consider using a Nomad if you were going to put a rail in the bathroom as well, or somewhere else in the house, so that it gives you the option to be able to still use the ceiling hoist transfers for anywhere that you want to do a transfer in the house. Also, you know, if the client has split accommodation, so they might have, it might be a child with, you know, parents who are separated, and so you could do the installation in their primary residence and then have the portable lift motor to go with them and install another rail at the house, at the second residence, if required. And the primary cost in the installation is the lift motor, not the rail, because the installation is surprisingly inexpensive relative to the overall cost of the project. Like, a lot of the cost is in the lift motor. So roughly the lift motor is around about $4,000. So on an installation that's $6,500, you know, you can get another rail in the same house. You've already got the builder on site. You know, it's not a really big cost. So that's something to consider. So that's the decision matrix I use when I was looking at whether I was going to use a Nomad or an Air. So you'd use an Air if the lift motor is not going to be moved ever really in its life, or if the safe working load's over 255 kilograms. So,
or if you were wanting power traverse or in-rail charging, Molex Air is your only option. Can't achieve those things with the Nomad motor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Cool. Next one. Yeah, so the other considerations are in-rail charging. So in-rail charging sounds like a great idea. In practice, it can be fraught with danger. So there's a conductive tape that runs down the inside of the rail that carries the power to the lift motor, and it's picked up by little copper contacts on the trolley on one of these. Oh, you can't see that, I'm waving it around. And the copper tape and the copper contactors can get corrosion on the surface of them, and it actually turns into a perfect insulator and it won't charge. So everyone goes, oh, in-rail charging is fantastic, but 3 years out, 4 years out, it can be a problem. So we'll do it if people ask for it, but we don't like to recommend it just because it can be problematic. And so there's an example of how the in-rail charging would work with a 3 metre rail. And the next picture is it can work with an XY system as well. So there's another pickup that picks up and takes it to the secondary rail and then takes it to the lift motor. Again, there's another point that can go wrong. So we're not really, we've got all the technology to do it. We probably do one a month. And we know that in 3 years' time, we'll get a phone call, oh, it's not working. So.
Yep. So the situation where we've had to do in-rail charging before was for a guy who did independent transfers and wasn't able to get the remote back to the charge cradle.
Yep.
Yep. So we needed a spot that he could charge the hoist in, sort of out in space. In the middle of nowhere, and that works great. But I'd agree with Andy there. It's probably a specialty thing.
Nice to have. But,
Nice to have, yeah.
yeah. The other thing is, as well, as Jeremy just mentioned, power traverse. So if someone's able, like, so with a, I often question the need for power traverse as well. It adds expense, and also if you have an XY system, you can only have power drive on the secondary rails. So along the primary rails, the hoist is still going to find its own level. So one of the things, like when you're using a ceiling hoist, when you start to pick up and there's no power traverse, the hoist will find its own equilibrium. So with a power traverse motor, if you haven't got it directly lined up, it will be off center a little bit. It can cause problems and drag the person across the bed a little bit. But you know, for someone who's able to put a sling on themselves and they get a single rail over the bed, or you know, or even a system that goes all around the house, it could be a great thing for them to be able to put the sling on themselves, elevate themselves, and do their own transfers. And we've done that for quite a few people actually, and it has been a bit of a life changer for them. So good thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at, like, you know, how to solve the problem. So
yeah. So the other application that I see for power traverse is really heavy patients. You know, when we get into the real bariatric levels, there might be someone in a facility to provide power traverse to aid the carers and things like that.
yeah,
Do you want?
But just bear in mind though that the friction is so low. Like probably the only benefit for having it with a bariatric client is not so much getting them going, it's stopping them.
Yeah.
So that's the because you do get a bit of inertia going, and it, like, you just have to be aware that once you get something that's 350 kilos moving, you're going to have to stop it. So that's probably the best case scenario for using power traverse.
Yeah. Do you want to, just in case, Andy, there's some of our participants here that haven't experienced someone doing independent transfers before. You want to just talk a little bit more about what that process might look like? Typically, we see it with paraplegics, but there are some other. So,
yeah, like it's not something a high-level quad or someone, like usually paras do it, and they would with our products they would use a toileting slings which they can place around their middle easily. And the leg supports are independent of the rest of the sling. So, well, you know, they're attached, but they're not part of the main structure. And they're able to pass the leg supports underneath their own legs and hook themselves up to the suspension bar. So once they're in the sling and they can get the hoist, you know, in front of their face and connect the lifting straps to the lifting points on the sling. Basically, then they just, you know, they have the hand control there. They can just lift themselves and transfer themselves, you know, off into a chair. So
we've got a couple of clients, Andy, who are doing quite well with a fair degree of independence in their own home, doing that sort of self-transfer. So that's a really good thing to be able to provide.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting when they work out that that's the way they're going to be able to live. So
yep.
That's
Excellent.
Whoops, no. So we've talked about what's, you know, the kind of systems you can install and what the lift motors are. Let's have a look at the types of rail that are available. So there's lots of different sections from NoLift, and they're all serve a specific purpose. So the first one we're going to look at is, if you press the button. Oh no, that's the span tail. That's the reason that we've got lots of different sections is, I'm just going to, so you can see that there's a whole list there. Can you flip over to me, Jeremy?
Yeah.
So these are like a couple of the different sections. So this one is a flush to ceiling rail, and the reason that there are so many different types of sections is that there's so many different types of situations you use the rails in. So there's 3 different sizes of rail. So these are 2 of the sizes. This one is 62 millimeters deep. This one's 112 millimeters deep. And there's another one which is 142 millimeters deep. And the reason that there are these 3 different sizes of this type of rail is because there's different structural requirements for each of the types of rail. So the smaller one has less capacity for spanning than the bigger one. So you can get away with less brackets or less supporting points with this one because it's so much deeper here. Or if it's being used in an XY system, you can't use this one because it doesn't like spanning 3 metres or 4 metres. But this one will span 4 metres with 250 kilos, no problem. And the 142 millimetre rail will span up to 6 metres, being supported only at either end. So if we flip back to the table, you can see on that there's all the information there is tabulated. So it shows you the distance between, so a little diagram on the right hand side of the page. The distance between the brackets is the A distance, like maximum distance A, and the B is the free end on the rail. So all those numbers there. So once you've made your decision about what safe working load you're going to be using, you choose the rail that best suits the installation situation, like for the number of brackets, or it's an XY system or whatever it happens to be. So, and if we'll show you a few details about that in a second. But so yeah, let's pop to the next slide, mate. So the flush to ceiling rail is this one here, and it's used. You predominantly use something like that in a new build, or if it's a major renovation and the ceiling's being replaced. So it allows you to fit down to that flange there. It allows you to fit the rail flush to the ceiling, so it's much more visually attractive. But again, it's not really suited to retrofitting. So if you're doing like a full bathroom mod and the ceiling's being replaced, good thing to do. But if not, you'll be using the open ceiling rail. So these are the 3 sections of open ceiling rail. So if we just jump back to me, mate, I'll show. So you can see from those pictures that there's that section in the back of the rail, and this little section here allows fittings to be placed into the rail and for it to be used to attach things to. So all the Motif rail has that. So you can, this product here is the T-bolt. So it is a stainless steel bolt, and it's used in a lot of the attaching the rail to the ceiling. So that's what that groove in the back's for. So it means it's extremely strong and really simple to install. So if we pop to the next slide, mate, or back to that original one. So those are the 3 sections: 62 mil, 112 and 142. So the 62 is for pretty much attaching directly to the ceiling. The 112 is used for secondary rails, and the 142 is used for really long secondary rails, or being clever with your wall brackets. So we've got another type of rail, which is the wall-mounted rail, and it's used for XY systems, and it makes a really, really clean installation. And I've got some of it here. You can see there what it looks like. But if we flip over to me, this is the rail, and it just is attached flush against the wall and fixed to the studs that are in the wall. Depending, like you'd have to do a structural investigation, but it allows you to have a really clean installation, and without having to get in the ceiling and do anything in the ceiling. And the trolleys that run in the rail is this thing here, and that just goes into the rail like that, and then the secondary rail just goes onto there like that. So, and these, because of this telescoping thing on the traverse trolley, it allows for up to, I think it's 50 millimetres of misalignment between the two walls. So if the two walls aren't parallel, and it didn't have that, if you did, as soon as you did up the bolts on the traverse trolley, it would get stuck in that one position. So this allows like really, really quick installations to happen and really clean installations to happen as well.
Really handy, Andy, when there's a raked ceiling involved or something like that, just being able to span between the two walls.
Absolutely.
And often it's a lot easier to determine the structure of a wall than it is the structure of a ceiling in some circumstances anyway, and that's a really nifty thing to have in our back pocket. Yeah,
it's just such a fantastic product. Everyone that we've done an installation with for this have been so pleased with it, just because the visual impact is so low as well. Next one. So, attaching to the how these things get installed. So the simplest way to do it is to get some rail, drill some holes in it, and attach it. If you flip back to me, Jeremy, I can show everyone the so that's just a batten screw, okay, and it's got, I'm using this is one of the Monolith T-washers that goes into the rail like that, and then it gets installed via that and done up, and it goes into the tenders, the structural tenders that are in the ceiling. So when you can do an installation like that, it's a dream. I don't have dreams very often, unfortunately. So, but you know, like sometimes the ceiling rafters align and everything's perfect, and you use that system, and you can install the rail, you know, in 3 or 4 hours, like done out of there. So that's the best, quickest way. So, and you can also use that method like attaching to concrete, different types of materials. So the next one is attaching to the ceiling using flat brackets. So I've got one of the brackets here, and it attaches to the rail using that section in the back, and then you fit the bracket to the ceiling. So whatever type of ceiling it happens to be, you bolt it up there. It could be a concrete ceiling, could be timber ceiling, you bolt it through, and then your T-washer's on there, and that slides into the system, and that you can have them either at 90 degrees like that, or in line like that. So, and that sits 40 millimeters down from the ceiling, so it's not flush to the ceiling or firm up against the ceiling like the other way with the batten screws. So, next one, mate. So wall-mounted brackets. I love wall-mounted brackets. They excite me. So if you have a house that's got masonry walls, like so brick walls, and so the room's 4 metres wide, instead of using the H62 rail, like the smaller rail, you can use a bigger rail, like this one, and that will span the whole room, being fixed only at either end. So you end up, they can go like that, hard up against the wall. And to do that installation, you've got to, 3 things you've got to do. You've got to get the brackets attached to the wall, and you've got to make sure that they're level with each other, so you don't have a downhill rail. And you've got to cut the rail to length, to the right length, so it's not too short or too long. So, and then bolt it up. That's pretty much it. And again, it makes for a really clean installation, easy to install. 4 holes, two in each bracket. So if you've got masonry walls, it's good to have that in your mind. That's a possibility. Pop back to the. So if you're not sure about the walls, we've got a system where you can use the vertical supports that go down the walls. So it's an aluminium section that has pre-drilled holes in it and some hardware that goes up and supports a wall-mounted bracket. So that all plugs together really well, and then the same thing, like all you gotta do is get the brackets level, and if the house is old, or you're not sure about the structure of the walls, or it might be lightweight materials like steel stud work or something, you can run the structure external to the walls, and you can do an installation where a lot of people can't do an installation. So that's another one to consider. Next one. So with the wall mounted rail, same thing. It fits flush to the wall and you fix it off. But if you're not sure about the wall, you can use those supports. And there's a little plastic moulding that fits under the top and locks in against the rail. So you support it like 3 or 4 points along the rail, and yeah, you've taken the load from the wall into the floor. So adjustable ceiling brackets. So we've got a range of these things, and they range from 80 millimeters through to 2 meters. So this is one of the short ones, and it's threaded. So once you fit it, you adjust it to get with the thread, and it changes the height of the bracket so you can get the rail perfectly level. This one is a telescoping bracket, which you would fit to the end of the ceiling space, and then with a grub screw here, like fixed off with the grub screw, drill through and put a bolt through it. So these would be used, we use these a lot in facilities where there's a false ceiling underneath a concrete slab, or sometimes in a house where you've got a complicated structural situation. So if we pop back to the other picture, to the PowerPoint, Jeremy. So once you get over 800 millimeters with the length of these brackets, you need to put side support on them to stop them from flapping around. So we have the capacity to do installations using threaded rod. There's a lot of people who use threaded rod. We don't really like it because it requires, always requires side support, and it requires a lot of side support. So we choose to use these brackets because they have structural integrity within themselves, so that it just means that there's less movement in the system for the client. So how to conduct a site survey. We've looked at all the different ways we can attach these things to the ceiling. I've sent, Jamie sent through to you all a copy of the site survey, and it's like an 8-page document, and the things that you really need to focus in on, because this is the document that we use when we go out and do a quote, and so that we don't have to go back again and again to get the details right. But I think the thing that we want to try and do for you guys is make sure that you capture enough information to give a good idea to Jeremy as to what's possible in the building. So the things that are important are going to be obviously the name and address details of the client, how tall they are and how much they weigh. If you can get that information on there, really important. The property type. So if you've got, if you're able to complete that information there, to be able to just so that Jeremy knows what kind of construction he's dealing with. Flat roof can be challenging. It's fairly hard to get inside the ceiling space of a flat roof. And the last little one there I've got on that page is at the bottom right of the first page or the second page of the document is the things that you probably need to take. So if you're going to try and get as much information as you can, tape measure. If you've got a laser measure, that's great. So that way you don't have to be running around with the tape and it makes it really quick to measure up. So a ladder, if you're going to try and take a photograph in the ceiling space, but I'd probably try and avoid that. And the torch and the stub detector, I probably wouldn't worry about that too much. Let me pop to the next page. So the reason you probably don't want to take a ladder and a torch is because you want to stay out of places like this. Those yellow things there are insulation bats and they are really itchy. So it's good to know like what's up in the ceiling, and if you're able to get a photograph like using a selfie stick up the manhole, it's kind of good so that it makes it easier to make a guess as to what's in the ceiling space. But really, I just leave that kind of thing to Jeremy so that they can come out and they can own the problem. Yes, mate? You were going to say something, Jeremy?
No, nothing from me there, Andy. That's fine.
Okay. So yeah, like so that underneath those yellow bats, that's the kind of thing that you're looking at. Is like the timber ceiling rafters. And what I was saying before about when you get the perfect installation is when the ceiling rafters are at 90 degrees to the lifting rail. You can pick up each one of those rafters and put a batten screw into it, and it just works out really well. But it doesn't happen very often. Usually run the other way for some reason. The rest of the form. So try and get some information there about where, which room it's going to go into, what sort of room it is, and so that's important to get. The other things that we'd like to see is if you can make a bit of a guess as to what the ceiling and the walls are made out of. So whether they're like plasterboard, whether they're like brick or whatever they happen to be, those are the most important things that you guys can capture when you go out on site, and take heaps of photographs, so that it just means that anything that's not taking notes, like we can sort of guess from the photographs. So, and the next thing is do a really good sketch of the room if you can, like showing doorways, positions of light fittings, where the charge is going to be, or where the power points are, those sorts of things, and where the beds are. And if you can pop to the next one, Jeremy, if you include where the lifting points are. So I've got a little diagram there. The lifting point for a bed is usually 90 centimetres from the head of the bed, and the rest of them, it's sort of you sort of have to just gauge it from the particular item that you're looking at. But yeah, the key one is 90 cent. The bed rails are generally 90 centimetres off the bed, unless there's a strong reason for not doing it. So.
Yep. So I suppose I'll just jump in here, Andy, from G Mobility's perspective. Really, we see this site survey form as a good way for you guys as therapists to go through with your customers what may or may not be possible. So just a general assessment that a ceiling track hoist is a possibility inside the home is what we would be requesting. Lots of photos and a bit of a sketch would be really helpful for us about what you were intending to do. But we realise that in most cases you'll be wanting us to come out and have a look at the job anyway. So if the client is funding privately, or you are needing a rough estimate of cost, all of that information is very helpful and would be required to get a rough estimate of cost. But if you're working with an NDIS participant or something like that, and we're getting to the stage where we're needing a formal quote, in most cases a site visit's going to be required anyway. So you fill out as much as you can on the survey form, and then we'd go ahead and we'll chat at the end of this about how we go ahead and work through the process of prescribing a ceiling track hoist for the various funding types that we've got.
Absolutely. Next one. So once the thing's installed, there's compliance. So all ceiling hoists are controlled by the ISO Australian Standard 10535, which is the hoist, hoist for the transfer of disabled persons. And there's a specification in there as to how the things are to be load tested. And and Jeremy does every time they do an installation, is we always load test our systems, just because you just want to know. So the other question that we get asked quite often is, do we need an engineer certificate to do an installation? And if it's insisted upon, it's possible to do, but it adds potentially $1,500 to the cost of the installation, and the system will be compliant if it's installed according to the MoLift installer's guide. So that's one of the things to bear in mind. But if an engineer is required, Jeremy will organise one for you.
Yep.
The next one. So once the system's installed, and it's a good thing to look at when you're looking around at like an existing ceiling hoist system, it needs to be properly identified as to who's installed it, and it's been tested the safe working load and what the safe working load is. So someone needs to clearly be able to identify what the safe working load of the hoist is and when the last time it was tested. So that's just a picture of the MoLift sticker. I'm sure Jeremy has identifications and stickering that he uses as well. So, but it's important to look at those things. So just so that it's safe. And I think that's it.
Great, Andy. That was really good. So I just thought I'd spend a little bit of time now. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. I just run through some recent experiences with different funding scenarios while we're waiting for any questions to come in. So we have had a bit of a change to the way the NDIS are considering the funding for ceiling track hoists at the moment, and as of the middle of this year, I think it was July or just before, ceiling track hoists now need to be installed by a NDIS registered builder. So G Mobility is working with a local NDIS registered builder for those installations, and if you give us a referral now for a ceiling track hoist installation, we'd be working together with our local partner to go ahead and facilitate that that installation. So that has held up some of the previous applications that we have done, and I think we're on top of that now. With regards to installations that are sort of privately funded or that are funded via a home care package of some sort, in most cases, the entire cost of installation is under the $10,000 threshold. I actually think it's a bit more than that, the threshold, but it's under $10,000. So there's not a legal requirement to use a registered builder for those installations. We install in line with the MoLift installation guidelines, and every hoist is load tested following its installation, just to make sure that it's going to be compliant with the ISO standards. So we can directly help you with that that sort of installation. Yeah, I think SWEP at this stage would also, I'd have to check into that funding scheme and find out what the story was with a registered builder there, but I could get back to you if anyone's got any questions about that. I'll just go ahead and read out any comments now. That was good, Andy. Like I said at the start, I really think these are underutilised, and people could stay at home in a lot of cases for longer and more easily. That sort of thing. And I love those the wall rails. I think that's a bit different to what we've been doing in the past, and I think that would make for a really clean installation.
it's like installing them is, you know, it's almost fun because if you've done your setup properly and you can pre-drill everything, turn up with the rails pre-drilled, put them up, and there's so little disruption to the client, and literally in a couple of hours they've got a system that they're using. So whereas, you know, like the getting in the ceiling, and it's very unpleasant. I've spent more time in ceilings than I really ever wanted to remember. And you know, you come out hot and itchy and really unhappy. So I'm happy to see more wall rails go up, and like, you know, the visual impact of them as well. You could take the secondary rail off and you think it was just a picture rail. So,
question from Marg, just confirming that the wall-to-wall cannot be installed on a plaster wall. I'll let you do that one.
Wall-to-wall can be, yep, for sure. Depending on, you know, what. So just going to clarify, Mike, is it just a straight rail? So if it's just a straight rail and the wall, you're not sure about the studs that are in the wall, you can use the vertical wall supports and the vertical wall supports and the wall brackets. So up against the wall, flush like there, and that'll transfer the load into the floor if you're unsure about the wall, and you just up to 6 meters for the H142 rail. So you can do it, yep, for sure.
So yeah, just to add to that, for a straight rail installation, as Andy has spoken about there, typically on a new build, you would be doing a little bit of bracing between the studs to do a single point attachment to the wall. That bracing could, in theory, be put external to the wall as well. However, it doesn't look really pretty when you do it that way. Wall support can be one way that we get around that. For the XY gantry style installation, I'd say that a typical timber frame stud wall would be fine for that sort of installation, because we can pick up most of the studs along the duration of the wall and provide the supporting structure that we need in an installation like that.
Absolutely. So with the if it's a new build and you're going to do wall to wall, you can do like triple studs, like you just triple up the studs, or you can between the two studs put a piece of plywood or and then plaster over the top of that. Definitely possible plasterboard.
Just a comment from Emily. Thanks so much, Andy and Jeremy. Great to get a more comprehensive understanding of the structural components of ceiling hoist and railings. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. At least Emily and Mark are awake. So,
yeah.
So that's my first attempt at PowerPoint. So apologies if it was death by PowerPoint, everyone.
No, I think it was good, Andy.
Great.
We'll just stick around for another minute or two. If you can let us know if you're awake, that'd be good. We'll close it off at 10:47.
I might just jump in there, guys, and add. First of all, thanks, Andy. Great presentation. As always, to everyone who's joining us today, we'll send across a certificate for attending, which you'll get to your email later. And we'll just ask you for some feedback, because we're always trying to work on ways to improve these, and we've adapted to webinars this year. But any feedback you have is always appreciated. So I will send some links through in the comments in a second. Thanks for joining us. Oh, we have some comments coming through.
Paul's still awake. Great presentation. Thanks, Paul, and thank you, Laura. Okay, good stuff, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. And if you have any questions, you can get in touch with Andy at patienthandling.com.au, or if you have any questions, feel free to direct them through us here. Jeremy@gmobility.com.au is my email address. So thanks, everyone. Bye from me.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Thanks guys.
Everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.